All right, so here we are back in working on this poster design, and I've gone ahead and grouped all of my layers because for each one of these photographic layers, I applied some kind of color filter and color effect along with another type of filter. And so you could see here on this image with the boy on the bike, I went ahead and grouped all of these different effects that I was applying to it. So that included a smart filter of adding noise, which I can turn on and off. And I also added the gradient map, and I also played around with a color fill. And each one of these has a mask. So for instance, with this color fill, I can always come back in here and I could add or subtract more of this effect and this color fill than what I was getting before. And so this is the good thing about adding these adjustment layers, adding these uh, smart filters using a smart object, is you can edit these to what you want it to be. All right, so we have one more image we need to add to the composition, but this image requires some additional retouch and reconfiguring. So I'm going to go up here to File, and I'm going to go to Open, and I'm going to look for this image here in the Images folder, and the one I'm looking for is this one, the old bike boy. All right, so if we open this image and we look at this, we can see that it's an antique photograph. It has some weather and tear. There's actual little small holes and tears in it. And so what we want to do is we want to correct some of this and retouch it. But the other thing we want to do is we want to modify some of the face as well. But before I do that, let me just introduce you to some of the tools we could use for retouching and correcting some of these errors. The first one here, it's a set of tools right here. And all these tools are using a early form of AI, but it's the computer's best guess at trying to reconfigure pixels. So the first one here is the spot healing brush. So if you use this brush, you can come up here and you can see that there's a few different ways of working with it. The first one is content aware. So if I use content aware, the computer simply tries to guess what the pixels underneath should look like. So if I were to come over here, and this works just like the brush tool, but if I were to paint over this area, it tries to average out and basically guess what pixels should be there. And so I'm using the content aware option. I can go back and I could try to use this option, which is proximity match. And proximity match is basically trying to look at the area around the pixels and then fill in the area with what it's averaging with the proximity. And so sometimes this works a little bit better. So I'm going to go around and look for areas such as this and other areas where there's these scuff marks and white marks, and I'm going to attempt to correct those. So as you move around the composition or the photograph, you want to look for areas inside of the photo that have like big chunks of white that are basically these scuff marks in the photograph, or areas where the pigment is falling apart. Now some of these areas can be difficult, so you want to adjust the size of your brush so that it's not too big, otherwise it's going to average too many pixels. And you want to try to get something that looks fairly seamless. Now sometimes if this brush isn't doing the best, I'll use this one, the healing brush tool. The healing brush tool is going to work a lot of the same way, but instead of averaging out the proximity, you're going to sample from another area that you want it to reference. So in this case, I could sample from over here and then come back to this part and try to add a touch-up. And that way you can choose the exact area that you want the computer to reference while you're retouching. And so in here, you know, like on his eyebrow, I might want to sample from here, which is pretty close, and then come over and correct that black dot that we saw. All right, so I want to show you this one. It's called the remove tool. So the remove tool is, again, it's going to work the same way as some of our other tools that we were just using. But this one actually tries to use a form of generative AI. So you really are leaning into the AI features that are here in Photoshop. So if I go to mode and I turn this on to generative AI, what I need to do is remove the pipe out of the boy's mouth. You know, because we're making a poster for today's day and age, we don't want to have a kid with a pipe in his mouth. So we need to try to remove this. And so I'm going to turn on the generative AI, and I'm going to reset my brush to where it's fairly large enough to where I can paint over most of this pipe silhouette. And I don't want to paint over too large of a region. So as I do this, I'm going to be careful not to go too far outside the bounds of the pipe. But I'm going to get it just to where it enters the side of the boy's mouth, and then I'll release. And now you can see it's kind of working on reconfiguring how that area should look. So not a bad job. I would say it did a pretty good job of removing it and replacing it with believable pixel information underneath. Now, undoubtedly, you will need to correct things as you use them. So for instance, it gave us some extra, looks like extra chunks of skin over here. So I might go over with that same brush into these small areas and see if I can get it to reconfigure that. If you can't get it to reconfigure it the right way, I would go back to some of these brushes, the spot healing brush and the healing brush. So let's just try the spot healing brush with the proximity match and see what it does. So in this case, I think it actually does an even better job than what we were getting with that other tool. I'm going to show you one more method for trying to adjust some of these areas. Because if we notice with the mouth, there's just something a little off about it. There's still a little bit of this extra kind of leftover pixels in here, and I want to correct that. But the main thing I want to correct is the side of the mouth just looks odd. So let me show you another tool. If I come over here, I'm going to use this one, the Content Aware Move tool. So watch how this one works. What I'm going to do is I'm going to make a lasso selection around this right-hand side of his mouth. After I make the selection, I'm going to make sure the mode is on Extend, and I'm going to move this side of the mouth. After I move it, I'm going to be able to transform this. So the first thing I want to do is I want to right click or control click and flip it horizontal. And then I want to try to rotate it to where it looks relatively believable. So I'm bringing back some symmetry onto the mouth, and I'm going to help correct some of that odd fade away that was happening on the side of his mouth. So once I have it the way I want it, I'll hit return, and then it does try to seamlessly blend that in with the pixels below. So if I hit Command D, we can see what we end up with. So not a bad job. I'm going to come back in and try to use some of the other tools so I can get rid of some of this extra stuff that came along with it. He has a little mole right here, and it brought that along. So I'm going to see if I can get rid of that. There's some areas in here too that I feel just need to be adjusted, but the proximity match is actually not doing a good job around this area. So instead, I'm going to use this tool here, the patch tool. So here's how this tool works. First, I'm going to select an area like this extra shadow right here. I'm going to select this area, and what I want to do is replace it with another area on the photo. So if I keep this here at source, and then I move this over to this side of the cheek, it's going to attempt to replace those values and those colors with these values and colors. So if I release, I can see how well it does that. And indeed, I think it did a great job. Command D. Now we don't have that big shadow that was still left over from here. Even on the side of his face too. I don't know if this was originally in the photograph, but there's a little bit of a aberration here. So I'm going to see if we can get a just a better look and feel right there. So go ahead, try to find some other areas that just look a little off and see if you can correct them using some of these tools. All right, so using a combination of my spot healing brush with the proximity match and the content aware, I went ahead and just kept detailing over the face to try to smooth out these areas. This is where the pipe was. And remember, the main thing is we want to make sure we're correcting for the scale this is going to be used at. So at a scale of about 100% or a little less, I think this is going to work fine. So now we just need to simply separate the figure from the background. I'm going to go ahead and just go back to using the object selection tool. And remember, this does a good job of trying to identify objects in the foreground. So I'll select the boy's figure first, and then I'll hover into the bike area and select the bike. So for the most part, it's done a good job, but there's still some gaps. And to fix those gaps, I'm just going to apply a quick mask And then I'm going to begin using the quick mask mode to brush in or out some of these areas that it did not include in the object selection. So I'm going to make sure I'm not using too soft of a brush. And I'll go ahead and include most of what's inside the wheels. It's going to be quite an endeavor to try to separate the spokes from the background, so I'm not even going to attempt that. So go ahead, take some time and see if you can get most of the insides of the wheels, but then go ahead and touch up some of the other parts of the bike so it's a nice separation. All right, so I have most areas that I want selected in here. And so now I'm going to hit Q again for the quick mask. And now that I have that selection ready, I can unlock the layer and then hit the mask. So now I have the image or the figure separated from the background. Once I have that, I can click on the layer thumbnail here and I can copy it, Command C. And then I can come back into my composition here and I can paste it. So I'm going to place this around here in the composition. And just like we did with our other imagery, I want to apply some of the colors and effects that we did to the other imagery. One way I can quickly do that is I can just choose another group here. So for instance, the truck, I have a gradient map applied to it. I can hold down an option and I can just copy that same gradient map up here and then apply it to this image. Obviously, we're going to need to adjust some of those values and where the gradient map is being applied, but it's just a really quick way of getting those colors on there. So go ahead and apply some of the filters and gradient maps that we did on our other images, and then we'll move on to the next part.